Do you believe coincidences are meaningful signs of life? For my part, I'm confused and divided about that. On the other hand, more and more people believe that there are no coincidences, but creations of our mental powers. As an instance of coincidence, the following is really impressive. On July 28, 1900, the King of Italy Umberto and I were having dinner at a restaurant in the city of Monza. It turned out later that the restaurant's owner looked identical to the king. The restaurant's owner's name was Umberto. His wife's name was the same name as the Queen's, and the restaurant was opened on the same date as the King's inauguration. The restaurant owner Umberto was shot dead the next day. So was King Umberto. Reference dailycognition.com. That's really interesting to me. These days, I'm looking through some books and websites dealing with this topic. I wanted to share with you whatever I have at my hands here. If you contribute to the discussion with your comments here, I'd be grateful. According to quantumself.com, nothing really happens by chance. We actually create what we call coincidence. When does coincidence happen in our lives? Stop and think about it. When you are focused on something and it has priority in your life, little coincidences just seem to occur. This is often said to be the law of attraction in action. This works no matter what you're focused on. If you're focused on worry and fear, or anger and frustration, you will see coincidence events, reflecting what you are worried about. Worry is actually a negative goal setting. The classic example is someone who's looking for success, but just can't achieve their goals. They might be focused on their goal, and that seems like a good thing, but their unconscious mind might be filled to overflowing with negative thoughts and beliefs. So what happens? They create negative coincidence events that sabotage their efforts. Self-defeating situations are inevitable when your mind is focused on fear, worry, or the concept of being somehow limited. Negative outcomes don't just happen in our lives, they occur when we refuse to pay attention to warning signs of a probable negative outcome. The same is true for the law of attraction. By the summary of the topic above, our minds and focused power can help make our wishes come true unless we avoid thinking of negative aspects and keeping clear of our worries. Wow, that looks like the secret to success in life, huh? Like I said earlier, one part of me says it makes sense. Our mind's power is positive transformation ability. Another part keeps saying, come on, if everything were so easy by mental power, life would be carefree and easy for everyone. But look around you. Wars and conflicts all around the world tend to escalate. So this mental power thing is off the reality, man. By the way, did you notice that my second part plays the part of creator of negative outcomes? So this theory actually seems to be true. If I listen to my second, negative side, I will not be able to avoid my fears and worries, and consequently, my results of my decisions will turn out to be negative ones. However, if I can clear my mind of negative sides, I will be able to make it. Now, let's try to find some proofs to support it. Focus on thinking of something you really want to attain to, or you really want to have. For me, I can say I wanted to be rich in the past, nor did I give it up. I still want it. Eventually, I could not be rich. So that means I had negative results of the decisions I made. In other words, I could not focus on the positive mind thinking, but I gave in to worries or negative assumptions. A guy might want to marry the girl he has a crush on. If he can do it, he is a good positive mind thinker. If not, he's a scaredy cat. When we look back in history, we see way interesting coincidences, or non-coincidences for others. For example, the British actor Anthony Hopkins, who shot to fame as Hannibal Lecter, was delighted to hear that he had landed a leading role in a film based on the book The Girl from Petrovka by George Pfeiffer. A few days after signing the contract, Hopkins traveled to London to buy a copy of the book. He tried several bookshops, but there just wasn't one to be had. Waiting at Leicester Square underground from his train home, he noticed a book apparently discarded on a bench. Apparently, it was The Girl from Petrovka. That in itself would have been a coincidence enough, but the fact that it was merely the beginning of an extraordinary chain of events. 2 years later, in the middle of filming Vienna, Hopkins was visited by George Pfeiffer, the author. Pfeiffer mentioned that he did not have a copy of his own book. He had lent the last one, containing his own annotations, to a friend who had lost it somewhere in London. With mounting astonishment, Hopkins handed Pfeiffer the book he had found. "Is this the one?" he asked. "With notes scribbled in the margins?" It was the same book. "What do you think of this thing Mr. Hopkins experienced? Could all these happenings be called mere coincidences?" Let's continue a real-life example below. A British officer, Major Somerford, while fighting in the fields of Flanders in February 1918, was knocked off his horse by a flash of lightning and paralyzed from the waist down. Somerford retired and moved to Vancouver. One day in 1924, as he fished alongside a river, lightning hit the tree he was sitting under and paralyzed his right side. 2 years later, Somerford was sufficiently recovered and knew that he was able to take walks in a local park. He was walking there one summer day in 1930 when a lightning bolt smashed into him, permanently paralyzing him. He died 2 years later. But lightning sought him out one last time. 4 years later, during a storm, lightning struck a cemetery and destroyed a tombstone. The deceased buried there? Major Somerford. And one last example. Lincoln and J.F. Kennedy. Both presidents had 7 letters in their last name. Both were over 6 feet tall. Both men studied law. Both seemed to have lazy eye muscles, which would sometimes cause one to deviate. Both suffered from genetic diseases. It's suspected that Lincoln had Marfan's disease and Kennedy suffered from Addison's disease. Both served in the military. Lincoln was a scout captain in the Black Hawk War, and Kennedy served as a Navy lieutenant in World War II. Both were boat captains. Lincoln was a skipper in the Talisman, the Mississippi River boat, and Kennedy was skipper of the PT-109. Both had no fear of their mortality and disdained bodyguards. Both often stated how easy it would be to shoot the president. Lincoln supposedly said, "If somebody wants to take my life, there is nothing I can do to prevent it." Kennedy supposedly said, "If somebody wants to shoot me from a window with a rifle, nobody can stop it." Note these both quotes are each 16 words long. Both presidents were shot in the head on a Friday. Both were seated beside their wife when shot. Neither Mrs. Lincoln nor Miss Kennedy was injured. Both wives held the bullet-torn heads of their husbands. In each case, the man was injured but not fatally. Major Henry Rathbone was slashed by a knife, and Government John Connally was shot. Lincoln sat in Box 7 at Ford's Theater. Kennedy rode in Car 7 at Dallas Motorcade. Lincoln was shot at Ford's Theater. Kennedy was shot in a Ford product, a Lincoln limousine. Both assassins used 3 names, John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald. It should be noted that Lee Harvey Oswald was known just as Lee Oswald prior to the assassination. There are 15 letters in each assassin's name, and both assassins struck when they're mid-20s. Booth was born in 1838, and Oswald was born in 1939. How could so many coincidences occur for these 2 people? If this theory is true, so why do people prefer the negative-minded thinking, given their existing wars in our world? So, what do you think now?